Cemetery. Now, during the Civil War, the casualties were divided into 3 different groups: killed, wounded, and missing. Missing were often captured. As well as this, 12 to 15% of these casualties were actually killed outright on the battlefield. And 2 such casualties lie here this evening right before us, interred as James Clark and Frederick Wills. Now, these 2 men were very similar in the fact that they had both enlisted in the Union Army at the age of 19, 4th Michigan Infantry Regiment, Company D, and they would end up here at Fredericksburg together. Unfortunately, they would both be mortally wounded on the date of December the 13th, 1862, during the battle, and they would fall next to each other, both having been wounded in the body. James having been encouraging his men as a first lieutenant to move forward, and Frederick as a colonel, as a corporal, being with his men and encouraging them to move forward as well.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Now, unfortunate as it is that both these men were initially interred in an area that is now Mayfield subdivision, as it's identified in the town, they were fortunate in that they were exhumed and reinterred here to lie side by side, identified by their names where their families could come and visit them. Unfortunately for many soldiers, as is the case in this cemetery, which has the unfortunate distinction of having 85% of those interred here being unknown soldiers, that would not be a privilege that their families would have, being able to come and visit them knowing where they were laying. Now, this was often because of the expediencies of war. There needed to be very fast burials of many people. For example, here on the northern end of the battlefield, there was not a truce as there had been on the southern end. On the southern end, on December the 15th, 1863, there was a truce between the Union and Confederate soldiers that allowed men to be buried at that time. Unfortunately, on this part of the battlefield, the northern portion, soldiers were not able to be interred until December the 17th, 4 days after they had fallen, and a Union burial party was allowed to come back across the river. Unfortunately, again, they were only interred in 2 major ditches that would be down on this part of the battlefield. And additionally, there were some bodies that were placed in an ice house on the outskirts of town, which wouldn't be found for a very long period of time. Now, fortunately for those who had been interred in the 2 large ditches, they were able to be placed in this cemetery in 1866 when this cemetery was established. Unfortunately, if you follow me over here, you can see the distinction between the 2 types of graves that exist here. The upright graves represent those, as with Frederick and James, those who can be identified. Those who are less fortunate are those who are unidentified and have a number identifying the plot as well as the number of those buried. With this plot here, if you look closely, you can see that there's only 1 soldier allegedly buried there. With this plot, you can see that there are up to 12 bodies allegedly buried there. So it becomes clear how unidentified many of the men are who are here among us this evening, and also that we have no way of knowing exactly how many men lie below us. If you'd like to continue the story of the National Cemetery, feel free to follow me to the next stop.